I'm going to talk about authenticity. But first, let's kind of get the elephant out of the room. Everyone is talking about authenticity. It's really important in your personal brand, but it's also important as how you think about your content and how you can build trust through authenticity. It's important because 86% of consumers say that they will support a brand that they find authentic, which means that they will put their dollars behind it. So it's the actual action they're going to take if they trust you and find you authentic. With the pandemic, we saw 75% of Americans change brands. So what you've been doing and considering authentic is not a set it and forget it strategy. 75% of Americans changed brands during the pandemic. So that says that it's something that should be on your radar when you're putting authenticity into your content and all of your branding efforts. State of Social, Brandwatch came out with their State of Social report, and where they really hit the nail on the head is that consumers are increasingly looking for authenticity from brands. So you have an opportunity here for your content to really fit that bill for what your consumers are looking for, whether it's prospects or retaining current consumers as well, current customers. This affects your perception. Authenticity builds trust, which is key and important because it builds your credibility. It also makes you relatable, so you want to connect with your audience. And if you build that connection with them, then they are more likely to be repeat purchasers. And then it also creates loyalty. And that's really the goal of every single brand, is to have loyal customers, because then they become brand evangelists and they will do all the hard work for you. Word of mouth is still the most powerful form of marketing. And if you have your current customers doing all that hard work for you, it lowers your costs and it bumps everything back up to trust. So let's look at some tactics of how companies in the real world are getting this right and how some are getting it wrong. Lovevery is a brand that you may or may not have heard of. It's a smaller company. I'm a mom of 2 small boys, 2 kids under 3. It's a lot. And I remember all the research that my husband and I did when we found out we were going to be parents for the first time. I mean, you want what's best for your kids. The second kid, you know, there's a little, not that you don't care less, but you really don't have the energy. And our kids are 16 months apart, so we definitely didn't have the energy. So all of our research was done up front. And I remember really looking at Lovevery. I subscribed to their newsletter, and they provided incredible value to parents, whether you were a new parent or a current parent. And it was really incredible. I remember when, this is the actual picture of the box when I opened it, and I had a 0 to 8 week old. And I remember reading their newsletter and them always saying, give yourself grace on everything as a parent, because there's so much pressure. And I remember opening the box. I did my own unboxing, which I did not post on social. I just did it for myself to really capture that moment. And I remember getting to the boxes in there that said, a little something just for you. And I was like, oh, what could this be? And I opened, and it was a mug. And it said, the days are long, but the years are short. And I was like, wow, they really get the parents. There was also a notebook in there, because #mombrain is a real thing. So knowing that you had a notebook to write things down in as you were trying to remember who fed the baby last or when they had their diaper changed, it was really clutch. And people are always pulling up their phones. Sometimes I just didn't have the energy to reach for it. And I remember keeping that notebook with me and actually writing in it. And I just thought how much value they provided in these little freebies that they were giving. But they'd also given me all of this mental and emotional preparation just from their free newsletter. So not only did they provide value before I was a customer, but they provided value once I became a customer. And they come with the books on how you can use their toys. And there's always a section at the back. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's a subscription service. So you get depending on your baby's or your child's age range, you'll get new boxes of developmentally appropriate toys for their age. So that was really important to me. Of course, my second child doesn't want anything to do with them. But they provided this sense of They provided this great sense of grace for myself because they have stuff that you can do with everyday items in your house, whether it is a colander and some dry spaghetti or an ice cube tray and marbles or whatever, not marbles because your kid could choke, but you get my point. They have, I'm showing some of my parenting with my second child now, I'm sure, but they provided all this value and it was ongoing and it was amazing. I still read their newsletter and it wasn't just, hey, buy our product. It's, hey, you're a parent. Every child develops at a different rate and they remind you of that in every box. And because we're always comparing and we shouldn't, but that's just kind of how we are. So we're always comparing, saying, okay, well, oh, this makes sense. It's nice to hear a third party, objective, tell us that, oh, it's okay. If your child's not in this stage right now, they'll eventually be, and that's fine. And I just absolutely love this brand because they provided so much value. And this is their website. And you can see on here, they're selling something in the beginning. They're talking about their play kits, but the second one is just activities to do at home with your baby. And that was kind of what I was talking about just now with, you don't have to buy their products and they're still telling you how you can stimulate your baby's brain. And then talking about swaddling, because that's a nightmare if you're a new parent too. So here's how you can add value. My rule of thumb is if you have any knowledge, you consider yourself an expert, you have any knowledge that it would take someone else who is not an expert several hours to research and learn that you could say in a paragraph, that's a way to add value. Whether it's in a blog post, whether it's a stat on social media, whether you're saying something on a podcast, those things add value to your current customers and to your prospects. Now let's look at a company that's not getting one of these tactics right, which is trust, which is the company formerly known as Meta. I know it's still called Facebook, but we're all probably pretty familiar with how Facebook had this grand mission. Facebook has changed so much from when I joined as a freshman in college in 2004. I'm dating myself, but I remember it was an invitation only, and people all know the story. And people also all know the story about how Facebook was called, or Mark Zuckerberg was called to testify in front of Congress for all the data privacy issues, and he is in trouble for fake news. So when Facebook said, hey, we're building this community to bring people together, and that's really what we're standing for, you know that that's a bunch of BS. We are not trusting Facebook. Facebook continues to say the things that they're going to do to clean up their platform and to build more of that trust, but it's all inauthentic. So I would call BS on this company. But you can build trust with your audiences with simple things like offering free consultations if you have some kind of service or a free trial. So let people get to know you and say, oh, you can, I'm starting to trust you. You're going to let me try this for free. I don't have to do an exchange, a financial exchange here. So it's worry-free and pretty painless. You can also do something so simple. If you are a small business owner and you have a website, I highly encourage you to go and make sure that you have a secure website. Make sure that you have an SSL certificate. Especially if you're asking for personal information or if you're asking for financial information. So if you're selling something, if you're selling anything and you're doing that online transaction, you want to make sure that you're letting people know that you're not going to steal their credit card information. Patagonia. Patagonia is another great brand that is really nailing authenticity. They're using their voice. First of all, they speak to people. Consumers like people. And even if you're in a B2B space, you need to remember that those are people too. They are representing a company, but you are speaking to people, whether it's a steering committee or one individual in procurement that has nothing to do with that has no knowledge of what you're doing for the company, because procurement often does that. They jump in and just help select the different services or products that they're going to buy, but you are speaking to a human. So that's really important. And I love Patagonia because they use their voice to really match their brand messaging with their mission and vision and values. One of the campaigns that they ran several years ago, or just a few years ago actually, is this Don't Buy This Jacket Black Friday campaign. And the goal was to say, hey, we care about the environment. You always hear Patagonia talking about caring about the environment. We care about the environment. You don't need to buy a new jacket every season. This is what, and there were several different versions of this ad. One of them talked about how much water was used in making it, or how many trees and different resources were used. And it actually boosted their sales by 30% following this, which they came out and said that wasn't really their goal, but it helped. But the nice thing is they are making this commitment here. They're using their voice. They're making this commitment, talking about how they want you to reduce any landfill waste, how they want you to reuse the jacket. They'll help you figure out how to repair your jacket. If it has a rip, they buy back your worn out materials. They have this whole process, and it goes to what they stand for, which is sustainability and protecting the environment. How you can use your voice is think about your brand. Everyone's talked about their brands today and what kind of messaging that you're saying. Does your brand messaging match who you are and what your vision and your missions are and what you're saying your company's values are? It was interesting when we saw the Wendy's example earlier, and somebody asked a question about whether Wendy's brand matched their Twitter brand, their voice on Twitter, to their voice in store. And I don't think it does. I could come up with a bunch of different ways to have that connection, but Wendy's is still fun. It's not hurting them at all. But if you are not a super well-known brand like Wendy's, you want to make sure that you're talking like a human and that your voice, that you're matching your message with your brand tone and voice. I had another fun brand that did not get authenticity right, that was in a lot of emission scandals and spent millions of dollars on a marketing campaign only to spend $15 billion just in the US on settlements for saying that they had clean emissions, clean diesel, when they really didn't have clean diesel. They just altered the computers to help. They just altered their computers to say that they would pass these emissions tests. And that's really tough. They were not transparent. They were lying hardcore about what they were doing. And people think that authenticity equals transparency, and it doesn't. That's a common misconception. Transparency is how much you are willing to share. And authenticity is whether it's true, how true it is. Very important distinction, because it is not the same. It is an element of authenticity, but it is not authenticity. Just because you're sharing things doesn't necessarily mean, and they were pretending to share, Volkswagen was pretending to share their new values and what they were doing, when really, again, we're calling BS on this, because they were in fact not doing this, and they got in serious trouble for it. Their sales have still not come up from that scandal. And that was 2015, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, but they have not recovered from it, just like Facebook hasn't recovered. Facebook has lost millions of users, and they're one of the least trusted brands in the world, which is really sad, because they could have fulfilled those missions. And Volkswagen could have done the hard work, but they didn't. Ways you can be transparent, a lot of it is people say they don't want to see how the sausage is made, but they kind of do. They do. They're curious. They're super curious. So if you have behind the scenes footage of things or challenges that you're facing and talking authentically about those challenges, everybody struggles. Nobody comes out of the gate with a business, whether it's an entrepreneur or somebody that's a really seasoned business person that's starting a new business or even running a business. The pandemic has shown, and the economy has shown, the major issues that companies are running into because they thought that they had it right, and you have to change and evolve. So show how you're doing that. Show how the sausage is made. Show your struggles and talk about how you are overcoming those challenges. When I was in college, Dove came out with their campaign for Real Beauty. And this is another one that hits me because I am a woman, and they uncovered that only 2% of women have a high opinion of how they look. And we live in a society where lots of people, like society is putting all of this pressure on everyone, but especially women, to look a certain way, be a certain size, have the right hair color, skin color, all of these things. And Dove did this great campaign where they hired artists to sit behind a screen, and they had women come in and describe themselves to an artist, and the artist would draw based on their description behind the screen. And then they would pull the screen down and draw what they saw. And they compared the two images, and every single time, the woman she described herself as much less attractive than how she was actually seen. And they ran campaigns on voting for different, they ran campaigns on voting for different people that they wanted to show on their campaigns, and they wanted to really make it so much more inclusive. And they were so relatable. And again, as a young college student, it really hit me because I saw myself as that too. I would think that I was the same person behind the screen as any of those other women that sat there as well. And they gained $4 billion over an 8-year period from this campaign, which goes to show that authenticity, while it sounds fluffy and it is subjective, that it actually can be tied to hard dollars. How you can be relatable, the first thing is to know your audience. Do your research. People think of really cool, interesting, fun campaigns and good ideas, but is it for your audience? Or is it for a different audience that you wish you had? So it's really important to absolutely know your audience and to show empathy. And you can show empathy in how you respond to social media comments, again, into the content that you're putting out there. Talk about topics that are important to your audience while also adding value to them. So we talked about these tactics that I think are really important: value, trust, voice, transparency, and relatability. But how do you put all this stuff together? Well, you do an audit. Everybody loves a good audit, right? You conduct an authenticity audit. You want to know if it's true. What am I putting out into the world? It could be a tweet. It could be a blog post. It could be an email nurture series. Will this benefit my audience? Can I fulfill my promise? Is it sustainable? Is it believable? These sound really simple, but a lot of brands get it wrong. As we just saw, a lot of brands get it wrong. Is it true? How do you show if something is true? How do you know yourself if it's true? Especially if you are creating content and someone says, hey, write this or put this out there. Even if you're at a director level, you might be getting things from the top. And as we know, and as we've heard, the heads of organizations, the leadership is not always connected to the people on the front lines, and they're not always getting the right information. So you can back it up with data. You can have credible sources. You can also use UGC, which is user-generated content, if you're not familiar with that term. And UGC is extra cool because 75% of marketers have all said that adding it makes their brand feel more authentic. User-generated content, if you're not familiar, is when your customers are basically saying, hey, we use this, we like this, this is how we're using it. And it's not you just putting quotes into a blog from a customer. It is their actual content. And then 80%, 81% of consumers said that they needed to trust a brand before buying for them, which ties back to 86% of brands needing to find, or 86% of consumers needing to find brands authentic before they support them. So it all ties together into whether it's true or not. And in this environment of fake news and heavy, I'll call it heavy politics, it's important. People want to make sure that things are true. Will this benefit my audience? You need to have some kind of benefit for your audience. We talked about adding value. Is it emotional value? When I got my Love Every box, I got a coffee cup. They knew I was fueled by coffee. That instantly added value. and they knew I needed to write things down. If you're providing a physical benefit or a mental or a financial benefit, and maybe it's a free how-to guide that you might be charged by, that one of your competitors might charge something for, or a consultation. So that provides financial benefits as well. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're putting out there is benefiting your audience. Can you fulfill your promise? Set realistic expectations. When the pandemic hit, everybody that boasted 2-day shipping times, including Amazon, didn't immediately, but pretty soon after, put banners at the tops of their websites saying, due to COVID-19, we're experiencing shipping delays. That's setting an expectation, as opposed to not addressing that at all. And everyone was feeling it. But as opposed to not addressing that at all and having people still think that their stuff was going to get there in 5 to 7 business days if you're not Amazon. Being reliable. Can you do what you say you're going to do? It's great when you think up these good ideas and you have these amazing campaigns and you start just saying, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And then you put it in writing and then you push it out to the world and you can't do it. That's tough. People don't like that. And then taking action. So if you say you're going to do something, or if you say that you support, like Patagonia, if you say that you support a cause like the environment, how are you showing that? That's really important. I loved this quote because it's from a customer experience author and expert. For many years as marketing, we've made things shinier, bigger, and brighter than they actually are. And this is terrible for the customer experience. The reason is you're starting a relationship with your customer by letting them down. I think we've all felt that, right? Who's been let down by a brand? Right, yes. And do you think that they could have set expectations better? Do you think they could have been more communicative? Probably, to kind of alleviate that issue. There are always solves for these issues. Is it sustainable? And I'm not talking about, is it green enough? I'm talking about, can you keep it up? Is this a one-time thing that you can offer and deliver on, or is it ongoing? If you have a high level of service, if you boast that you have a high level of service, or you have the best customer service team, can you actually deliver on that? And can you keep it up? So yes, can you fulfill the promise, but can you also keep doing that? Or can you only do it one time? That's really important also to think about. And is it easy to maintain? This is for you internally. If you can't maintain it, then obviously it is not sustainable. And then show up if you mess up. That is one of the huge ones. So if you make this promise, again, going back to can I fulfill my promise, but it all rolls in, if you mess up, you need to have a service recovery plan. You need to come out and say, hey, I'm sorry, and this is how I'm going to fix it. And show up in that space and own it. Is it believable? Facebook said it was going to clean up all of its fake news issues and better manage their advertising to make sure that there weren't bad ads out there. I had an image of an ad for cancer treatments that were not accurate, which was really bad. They were not approved, but Facebook approved the ad. So it goes to show, I personally, who in here actually believes Facebook when they say that they're going to do stuff? Yeah, right. See, that's bad. People are leaving their platform. So in order to make things believable, consistency. If Facebook said, hey, we suck, and we're probably going to continue to suck, you'd believe them, right? Because that would be consistent with what they do, with how they act. And it's on brand for them, and they have a track record for that. So, I mean, that's a great negative example. But if you are consistent with what you're doing and saying, and you are on brand, because it all goes into that brand, that messaging, tying to your mission and your vision and your values, then all of those things say, yes, this is believable. So the authenticity audit, we'll go over it again. Is it true? Will this benefit my audience? Can I fulfill my promise? Is it sustainable? Is it believable? You can write these 5 questions down, and every time you come up with a campaign or anything marketing related or whether it's a money back guarantee. Can you actually, like, would you go out of business if you gave everyone a money back guarantee that needed one that didn't like your product? I mean, then that's not sustainable. You just take 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how long a piece of content is, or how long, like whatever you're doing campaign-wise, running it across different platforms. And you sit down and you say, okay, can I answer yes to all these questions? And if you can't answer yes to all these questions, how do you fix it? You talk to your teams. You talk to leadership if something's off. And someone asked a question earlier about how to get leadership involved if there's a disconnect between different demographics, like younger people coming in and talking to older leadership. You take baby steps and you get different people on board with you up the ladder. So you go to your team or your manager and you talk to them and you start small. And then as you gain traction, you end up talking to the right people and you move it up the ladder, and then it becomes a company-wide initiative, but you have to start small. And some things that I've uncovered, messaging doesn't necessarily match. So with some of my clients, messaging on whatever they're trying to say, I gave the example of like a money back guarantee. Think about it if you're selling a product and you say, oh, free returns. Well, did you bake that into your price? If somebody ships it back, will you go out of business or not be able to cover those costs if somebody's returning something? And how do you fix that? Do you need to go and talk to your supply chain and say, hey, we need to get better rates? I mean, there are different ways to do these things. And other things that we've talked about with clients are messaging. So if you're saying that you believe in something, or that 10% of profits for this month are going to go to breast cancer in October, are you actually doing that? Can you do that? Do you have the authority to say that? And if you don't, either get the ability to do that or do something different. Talk about supporting. You can say that you support it. You can share stories in ways that you have supported it in the past. But messaging is critical. Going through these 5 different steps are super critical. And again, just taking those 15 to 30 minutes and making sure that everything that you are putting out into the world, that it is authentic, and you will establish trust, and you will build an audience, you will attract new customers, and you will retain current customers. Anybody have any questions? I'm a little early, so I'm not a good stand-up comic. And I don't sing well. Although my 3-year-old says I sing phenomenally.